happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Is this being recorded already?
It is.
That's nice. So, a little background on me. I'm a United States veteran for the Marine Corps. That's where I learned technology, systems, and basically a lot of what I know and do today was in the Marine Corps. But I built, bought, and sold 6 different tech companies over the last 40 years of my career, all in and around technology mostly. This is my 7th one as a certified scaling up coach. And we basically help companies grow and scale using the scaling up methodology. The scaling up methodology is all about 4 pillars, and that's people, strategy, execution, and cash. Today, I'm going to go over the people decision because there are 4 decisions that are important for all of us, but too much to go through in this exercise. So ask yourself, knowing what we know today, are all stakeholders happy and engaged in the business? And would you enthusiastically rehire all of them? And this means not just team members. It also means vendors, partners, and advisors. I can't tell you how happy some of my employees have been when I fired a client or a vendor because they were just sucking us dry. So it's kind of a good exercise, but get the right people. We walk clients through proven exercises that have helped thousands of other companies dominate their industries, all to answer this upcoming people question for your team. Oh, and by the way, I want to caution you, I've got like 4 short 2-minute videos from Vern, but I think they're really poignant in this subject, so I put them in. So do you have the right people in the right seat doing the right things, or the right people on the bus? And I like to really add a 4th one in there that holds themselves accountable, so you don't need to micromanage them. And these are really good things to think about with your business. To define what right people means to the organization, we mean A and B players. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. To introduce the topic of the 2-axis approach to evaluating this, as it's been popularized by the book Top Grading by Bradford Smart, you need to know who your players are on the team. To inspire decisive action around B and C players, coach up your B players and coach out your C players. Especially in these days, these times where we're having problems with employees, it's really important to get a good core culture all in and around A players, if you can. Here's a tangible case study about how defining and sticking to your core values can help keep your team aligned during periods of rapid growth or a downturn. I mentioned Atlassian due to their explosive growth. They hired, fired, and were willing to take a financial hit due to their core values, which is key. Being able to take that financial hit so everybody lives those core values. And they basically grew from 50 employees to 3,500 employees. And they're still to date one of the best places to work. I like to ask this question, the mission to Mars question. If you could take 5 people to Mars, only 5, and create a whole brand new universe, who would you take?
It's a great breakout question. I love it.
Yeah, it'd be a great thing to hear what people would do. These people basically emulate your culture and your core values you want as an organization. Let's hear a video from Vern Harnish. It's under 2 minutes, but it's a good video.
All sports have rules, and that's really what core values do for your organization. They really set up those boundaries. And look, nobody would want to play a game if there weren't clear rules that define, and they're unique to your game, your company. And that's why you want to use the Mars mission exercise that Jim Collins created, because they're going to be unique to your culture or cult. And by the way, that means that not all of them have to be positive. Disney, who I did work with many years ago, they actually, one of their core values is around controlling the experience. It's a very controlling kind of culture. And if you're not comfortable in that, then their immune system's going to kick you out. And then the key is, once you've done that initial discovery, you want to let them bake for about a year. Every quarter, you want to take a moment and say, hey, what are some stories where we've had a chance to live those values? And I know when we first did it in our own organization, our initial list of core values, there's one that we had missed. We kept having stories, but it wasn't represented among those values. On the other hand, there was one value that ended up just being a nice to have or a wish we had, but there were really no stories that supported it. It wasn't deep into our culture. And then we spent some time kind of rewording them. If you want a great example, I want you to go out to Atlassian's website, and I want you to Google and look at their core values page. And you're going to see that they've got these really interesting, unique phrases that fit within their culture. Their descriptions are very instructive. And then they put together a really neat core values video. I think how they've structured their core values landing page is a great model for all of us. And by the way, it was something that Scott put together back when he had just 50 employees coming out of the workshop in 2005. I led there in Sydney, and they're still at the core of that organization 3,500 employees later. Good luck in getting these core values right.
Yeah, I'm a real big believer in getting your core values and being transparent, having them right out there for everybody to see. To introduce a simple exercise for top grading a team, we have this talent assessment chart that we use, and I'll go through and explain all the different quadrants and how you fill it out. The talent assessment chart has 2 access points. On the left side, you'll have your core values, 0 to 10, and on the bottom right side, you'll have your productivity for how productive the actual team member is. And then at the bottom of it, we go through and we'll fill out, how they actually rated. So you basically put their initials in where the 2 intersect to each other. They might be a 7 in core values and they're a 9. So that would, on their productivity, that would put them out here for their initials. Or maybe their productivity is really low, but their core values are high. Again, it's going to put them out here in the B side. But it's a good way to get a really good understanding about who and what your team members are all about. So I like to say coach up or coach out. Coaching will enhance B and A players. It will not solve the B and C players. It's just not going to happen. B players should be coached up. C players, coach them out. A players are not waiting at the bus stop. Find your perfect fishing hole. That as the A players your company needs and deserves. In tangible terms, let's listen to Vern on how recruiting from your own fishing hole will drive people's success. I promise there's only 2 more videos after this, but I think Vern says it pretty well.
Right now, talent acquisition is probably one of the hottest topics that our surveys are showing that are common with companies all around the globe. And I think it'll always be that case. If you can get the right 8 players, you're going to win. So what's the key? You want to fish where there's fish. And so it's important that I think every organization find a consistent fishing hole. I remember early on, Michael Dell said, look, I need key folks who have both engineering degrees and business savvy to really help run my factories. And so he ended up building a very close relationship with the Sloan School at MIT, got to know the professors, he spent time on campus, and he made sure that, hey, if they had a really, really sharp student, that he would be one of the first.
Oh, sorry.
To be known.
First technical.
And so that was his fishing hole. I remember Christy Jones at the same time was trying to scale up Trilogy in Austin. At the time, Michael was hiring like 500 people a month. He was sucking up all the oxygen. And so she was in this building. It had this kind of cool rooftop. And so every Thursday, she set up this kind of event. It became the place to be and be seen. If you were in the tech scene, you had to go through her offices to get there. And that was her fishing hole, her place where she was able to attract and acquire talent. Early on, I had a student that was just in the carpet retail business, and she needed more salespeople. One of the keys is you don't want to poach from your competition, because not only do you have to train them, you have to untrain them first. And she really couldn't pay them any more than what her competition could. And so what we did is we looked at an adjacent industry. In this case, it happened to be shoe retailing. The top shoe salespeople in that industry could only make about half what they could selling carpet because of the difference in price. And so she simply said, that's going to be my fishing hole. I'm going to go out to the shoe industry. I'm going to put in kind of blind ads and say, hey, would you like to make twice as much as what you're doing right now selling shoes? And she ended up with this beautiful, consistent supply of salespeople that she could recruit. And they were absolutely thrilled that they had an opportunity to make twice as much. Equally important, she didn't have to untrain them. They came in with the sales skills, but she could teach her unique way of selling carpet. So find a fishing hole.
Yeah, and the fishing hole, like in the shoe example, is really kind kind of poignant pun. You may not.
Right now, talent acquisition.
Sorry about that. I can't stress how important it is to set a bar that's high entry. The whole idea is it'll help prevent B and C players from coming into the organization. But more importantly, it shows your A players you mean business. It solidifies you with your culture and your bond with your A and B players as well. So I think I've heard many times, the more no's you give, the more yeses you end up with. Same thing with your employees or your team members. So retention of existing A players is not always about money. I know everybody thinks it's always about the money, but you really want to keep them engaged. And I'll give a quick example of my daughter, Corinne, who worked at GQ magazine as a social media designer for the 3 years right out of college, but she wasn't engaged. She moved over to A24 Films, and it was basically a lateral move, a little bit more money, but the reality is she didn't do it for the money. She did it because she was engaged and she really loved what they stood for and loved their core values. So that's a real life example that really resonates. Inspire a mindset shift. It's, managing is really kind of a way of the past. Now we really need to become more enablers and coaches. Nobody really wants to get managed. I know I don't. Here's a list of concrete examples of what coaching in the workplace might include. It's very important to define what right seats means to the organization. Saying it's one thing, but actually defining it's something else. We use a function accountability chart to define that right seat and be clear on what's expected and what results we require. And I think it's good for the employee because the employee actually gets to know how to play the game. If you don't know the rules to the game, how are you going to play it, how are you going to win it, right? So we use this chart to define who is accountable for a function and to ensure that there are not two people doing the same function. Because the worst thing that can happen is two people think they're doing the same function and think the other person is taking care of it. And that's what happens all the time. So you don't want to have two people in the same seat. But basically, you would list out the functions: head of company, marketing, R&D, sales, human resources, and then the person accountable and leading indicators, and then the results. As you'll hear from Vern in my last video, he talks about starting from the back and working your way forward, which I agree. So sales might be attributed to revenue, marketing, revenue and sales, right? But once I think the team member realizes what their job function does, how it relates to the bottom line, I think they take a bit more pride and care in what they do because how it affects the company as a whole. Here's my last video, I promise.
Let's take a look at the FACE tool function accountability chart. And one of the things that we've learned over time is it's really best to think about it and maybe even fill it in backwards, starting with column 3, which are the outcomes and results. Let's have the end in mind. And so if we look at a kind of a traditional organization, revenue would be maybe the head of sales or marketing, gross margins typically head of operations, profit would be then either your controller or treasurer, and then obviously the CEO or head of the company is making sure that those are being hit by those individuals, and they probably either have cash or return on investment. So you want to start with assigning the outcomes. Then you want to go to column 2 and say, okay, what are the real key performance indicators that are going to drive those outcomes? One of the things that we've learned is that there's a lot of stuff that we measure that if you really go back and correlate it, have nothing to do with the outcome. It's one of the reasons why we're big fans of the book Moneyball, where they had a chance to look at the baseball industry and they discovered that a lot of the stats that they were looking at had no correlation to actually winning games. And so you want to do the same in the organization, is zero base your key performance indicators and correlate that they actually do impact the results or outcomes. Then you want to say, all right, if that's the KPI and the outcome we need to deliver for that function, do we have the right person in that place? And so let's work the FACE tool backwards.
So here's a few resources I'd like to suggest. These are books that I've read and I think are good for anybody, especially The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. So if you're working with a team, it's very common to have dysfunctions, lack of trust, absence of accountability, fear of conflict. I can go on to all of them. What Got You Here Won't Get You There, another great book by Marshall Goldsmith. And my most recent one I just read was Who Not How by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. I spent 13 years at the Strategic Coach, being coached the last 6 by Dan Sullivan. So I'd highly recommend these books, and there's many more. And that is my story.